Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President of the European Parliament, Madam President of the European Commission, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, Madam Vice President of the European Commission, ladies and gentlemen, MEPs, ladies and gentlemen, both in the room today and from afar through remote conferencing. I am quite a happy man to see you, that we can gather once again together today during this Europe Day. I'm very pleased that we're celebrating it with a shared political commitment orchestrated by what will become our universal language. The artists are willing to play their part. And here we are gathered in Strasbourg on the 9th of May, which tells us a great deal about who we are, how we're going to work to shape ourselves after the 70 years of a common experience and looking at the founding moments in our archives. Strasbourg is the city of reconciliation, after all. It is the living symbol of this Europe that said no to war, to build peace, to replace occupation with cooperation, to lift the worries looking towards the borders, to breathe new confidence and friendship into European souls. That's what Strasbourg is all about. Strasbourg, the capital of Europe, is a symbol. And we're not building an imaginary Europe, we're building this feeling of belonging. Strasbourg is the home to what it is in its democratic efforts of outreach, and not just looking to the past, but inspired by it to build the future. This is where the European heart beats. The Council of Europe, the European Parliament, the Parliament that unites us, not a weakness, but certainly it allows us to show our strength and to affirm our identity. So, President David, thank you for being here today with this firm decision to start with the European Parliament's work once again in Strasbourg as soon as possible. We discussed this at great length before. This is a founding chronic of time that we just witnessed together, and this should lead us, it should inspire us to basically grow accustomed to the current situation, but to overcome the weaknesses, but to remain permanently optimistic and driven. That is our duty, and we need to breathe a new democratic life into our institutions and to build that confidence that we have in Europe amongst our citizens. We are here in an unprecedented pandemic that has affected us for more than a year worldwide, but most particularly in Europe. When these huge crises fall upon us, and we've had many, many such occurrences in the past, there are always very deep-seated doubts and national instincts that start to make themselves comfortable. We've seen today that some people are challenging what we are about, who we are, and just forgetting everything that we've built up. That's what's at stake today. That's the risk, that is to just give up out of a sense of just not knowing what to do rather than to build on what we've done. And we can already hear people attack Europe, accuse it through this spirit of defeatism. Look at this Europe, Europe missed the boat. And I say it's quite the opposite. In this crisis, it is a European model that really came into its own. And I think we've seen the pathways forward, given the challenges before us. This model is our DNA, our deep identity. I want, basically, in inaugurating this conference, although we've talked about the decades ahead, I wanted to recall that if together we manage to resist in the face of this, it's because for 70 years now we have built together, which didn't just happen, it wouldn't have just have happened by itself, without real effort, through our model of social protection, a Europe characterized by solidarity. It is the result of a model that is productive and social, a Europe of competitiveness, of competition, of economic strength, but it is always thought in terms of solidarity from the word go. Solidarity towards the regions, towards the local communities, and in terms of ambitious policies. Nowhere else in the world do we have so much importance attached to life and we're happy with that. And on a continent, when lives are sacrificed in order to preserve the economy, sometimes that wasn't possible. We made that choice in Europe to show our solidarity, a humanitarian face. And we accompanied everybody along the way with our healthcare system, which we funded together. We helped our businessmen, our independent workers, industrialists, and all sectors the most hardly hit. And we have every reason to be proud of what we've done. Would it just have happened? The poor countries, of course, very strongly hit. Even the other continents trying to act were forced to sacrifice lives, quite simply, to keep the economy going. Otherwise, the crisis would have made more victims. Other countries have sacrificed many of their economic models. They don't have the same solidarity model. I think of our friends, our allies in America. Our model is our strength. And we've managed to resist together. We've managed to come up with a rapid response together, given the crisis that started 10 years ago, an immediate reaction, a rapid budgetary response with the European sponsor of July last year. And together, we built a vaccination campaign. We put it together, we made it happen, and I would like to thank the President of the Commission. We did not have that community competence at the beginning of this crisis. We got our act together. We managed to decide to gain pace, to gain momentum, and yes, European cooperation did save lives and will continue to do so. That's our strength. And yes, this model of solidarity is the one that from the very beginning of the crisis has allowed us to rekindle our faith in solidarity through the initiatives with our African partners, with vaccine solidarity, with our Balkan neighbors, and continuing to build on that solidarity. We're happy, I'm pleased that with our American allies, they're joining us now on this path to help us in our endeavors, to open up, to export doses, the transfer of technology to produce more vaccines, and particularly to send to all who need it. This cooperation, this spirit of solidarity is bigger than any of us. It is what leads us with our neighbors, and particularly our African neighbors, to build the decades ahead of us. Our second major strength, once again, became clear during this crisis, and I don't think you can possibly say it enough. It's democracy, which is part of our identity. And despite it all, insidiously, more and more, it is being called into question. People are wondering how effective it is. I hear, like you do, the voices of those who are in authoritarian regimes. They haven't been very effective in this crisis. They haven't managed too well. Basically, it's what our citizens expect of us. And of course, if we forget the real consequences of the authoritarian regimes, the lack of freedom, more and more political detainment, university professors being stifled, it's not just academic. They've forgotten that they are part of history, those that chose to embark on that path. But we have every reason to be happy to carry on, to openly discuss and to conduct in our democracy everywhere in Europe this democratic debate, the criticism, challenging, the fights, quarrels, disagreements is what defines us, and it's also what makes us more effective. It allows us to express criticism democratically. This model, which is productive and shows solidarity, part of our European ID, being attached to protecting the environment and the climate, and we maintain that ambition during the crisis through the Green Deal and through the digital platforms and protection of privacy, respecting the rights and freedoms. Strasbourg is a place of many symbols because of the battles that we have waged during the pandemic. It is a model based on an economic and social system that has shown that it is resilient in times of crisis. And yesterday and the day before in Porto, we saw that to adapt to the transition to the digital era, and with genuine protection for our workers, allowing us to grow, to create jobs, which goes hand in hand with fighting exclusion, poverty, and promoting gender equality, the respect of fundamental rights of all workers in all value chains. That is our model. And I want to recall that before we start thinking about the 10 years ahead of us. Never can we allow it to become vulnerable. It is a treasure that we have earned, that we have built over time. In this crisis, it does show some cracks of weakness, and Europe has to be able to do things. And our aspirations that we're entitled to should be based on what the causes of the crisis were. First of all, we understood the message. It is solidarity that goes hand in hand with sovereignty. You cannot have a model based on solidarity. You cannot be helping those who are the weakest in our society if we don't produce, if we don't decide to defend the sovereignty of our space. We were divided at the beginning for some time when it came to purchasing masks, shutting our borders at times. Even for the recovery, we got divided whenever we were dependent. Each and every time we were up against a risk in the response when it wasn't in our hands. We managed to ensure that sovereignty was the ability to produce today and tomorrow, and I don't think that we will have a Europe that's up to its date in history unless we realize that in the 1980s, 90s, and in the 2000s, we were a large consumer market, and we are still today. And we need to once again become producers. We need to become once again a community of major scientists, large entrepreneurs, major artists, industrialists. Because production, creating on our territory is guaranteeing our sovereignty, protecting our model and our values. And it is this sovereignty, this cultural, academic, industrial, research sovereignty is crucial. Building it is sometimes meaning winning back things that we allowed to slip through our fingers, and sometimes strategically coming up with a response by seeking alliances, European industrial alliances, as we've started. Once again, with hydrogen, semiconductors, the cloud, managing what we've done in a matter of times to become the #1 vaccine producer worldwide. But we need to go far further because each and every time there's dependence on the external world, Europe is divided. We also learned during this crisis a second lesson. When Europe has the ability and the resilience to act, you do once you are driven by the political motivation. As of March 2020, the European Central Bank was up to the task and suspended the budgetary and competition rules, which allowed us to state our desire to get the economy going again. But in many areas, the European Union doesn't have the same competence or the same wherewithal. And sometimes it really has very little to work with in the field of health, and that's still the case today. This weakness explained the difficulties in coordination. Therefore, we need to learn the lessons. Given this major shock of the pandemic, we need to beef up our common capacity because it is at the European level that we'll come up with the relevant response. And finally, we've noted oftentimes that Europe wasn't moving forward quickly enough, was lacking ambition. In this very hemicycle, I stated my conviction that in dealing with authoritarian regimes, the only valid response is the authority of democracy, and you can only get that if you are effective and quick. Our European democracy is one of compromise, of striking a balance, and that's something that we need to protect like a treasure because it avoids any hegemony. It is also a weakness when we are strangled in our own procedures. There is no fatality in the procedures, but once again, we need to find an effective way forward with ambition to get through the crises and to avoid not taking decisions. We need to be stronger. Looking at the figures of our program, our research investment program on industrial projects for the future, if you compare what we've done with the US or China, we're not yet where we need to be up to our ambition. And too many months have taken to finally get the investment decisions that are 5 or 10 times lower compared to our US counterparts. In other terms, I'm pleased that the United States of America looks to Europe to become more of a society of solidarity, and I hope in my deepest of hearts that in Europe we will once again find faith in the future and act swiftly for massive investments, acting on these investments. And therefore, it is our duty to pull this off, to act more quickly, and to find the relevant subjects to gain that momentum. This crisis has affected us in our most intimate parts of life, our private lives, imposed limits on our travel at the borders. I see many young Europeans' faces. I see artists who have suffered a great deal during this crisis because they have had their concert rooms taken away from them, their contact with the public stripped away from them. And I think that at this conference it is essential we need to find the path towards the future once again, and that is what this conference on the future of Europe is all about, to find a way to shape democracy collectively and to learn the lessons, and I haven't even covered all of them, but also to find the ways and means once again to find a long-term outlook, a real, genuine outlook based on shared objectives. Our friends are the most involved. I would like to thank them at this time, but there will be a year of debate where we'll meet one another, the institutions, the parliament, the social partners, and we know how very much they want to be part of this discussion. The thinking groups of all citizens, European groups at the local level, the online platforms available in all languages, a citizens panel. It will be an unprecedented exercise to listen to the entire continent and to think of what we want our future to look like. From the beginning, in autumn, we had the citizens' debate in each region, and I asked the heads of government to get involved. We need to make a collective commitment today, as soon as March of 2022. When we look at all of the contributions, put it all together, sum it all up, we, political decision makers, and the various member states, the European Parliament, the European Commission, will have to take that into account and inform Europe. And picking up on what we did in the first half of 2022 in the presidency, organizing a conference that we hope will continue with this, and we need everybody to be on board with a full commitment. This conference is something we owe to our young people. We ask them to make the hardest sacrifice during this crisis, after all, and it is for them that we will build this new Europe. When I spoke of all these values in our success, it's because we have the privilege of having the years of struggle, sometimes dangerous and horrible struggle over the years. And for our young people, once again, we need to have a conference where they have their rightful place. Today, there is a broad online consultation process underway with 50,000 young people telling us what their priorities are, what their aspirations are, their priorities, their dreams. And as of this autumn, we'll take a new youth initiative, once again in a very real sense, to support students to find their way back to the classrooms and to help those who have launched on building a new business, each and every one to have such a new experience in another country, thanks to the European Commission, the European Investment Bank, through national means, additional relaunch measures. That's how we're going to do it, and on the substance, you will have to write that chapter in the history books. I hope that this conference will sound off the time of major projects, major ambitions, major dreams. What do we want Europe to look like in 10, 15 years? What borders will it have? What new institutions? What major cultural projects will we launch together? How can we make this Europe the leader of reduction of emissions? And I hope carbon neutrality achieved even more quickly. How can we build this Europe of education, of research, making it even stronger? The new borders in space, in our oceans. How can we manage, basically, to write our new legends for ourselves? A French poet who's been often overlooked, Patrice Latour-Dupin, said it. All countries that have lost their legends will be condemned to die of the cold, and that will apply to our Europe as well. If we lose sight of our legends, we will die of cold. We have our legends. We need to go through them quickly. We need to write new legends. It is up to us. It is up to you. Thank you, and I'm counting on you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. And while we are getting the stage ready for the Karski Quartet, let us take the opportunity to explain to you how you can participate in the conference that we just heard about. To begin with, you can submit your ideas for change, your worries, your questions on our website, futureeu.europa.eu.
Alors, il y a aussi des...
There are also events which will be organised in all member states in your regions, either by digital means or otherwise. There will be panels which represent different areas and different parts of society. There will be different topics which will be taken into account, and then these will be fed back into the plenary conference in the EU institutions. But there's also social partners and obviously